Well, hello everyone. We still have people joining us, but we're going to get started. I am so excited that you decided to spend your evening with us and travel to Antarctica or learn about traveling to Antarctica with us. I am so happy to be traveling virtually with you guys to this beautiful place. I have a wonderful guest speaker as well tonight that we are going to go back and forth and share content. Kristen, if you don't mind, take us to the next slide. What does travel mean to you? And I wanted to start with one of my favorite quotes from Anthony Bourdain that says, travel isn't always pretty. It isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it hurts. It even breaks your heart, but that's okay. The journey changes you. It should change you. It leaves marks on your memory, on your consciousness, on your heart, and on your body. You take something with you. Hopefully you will leave something good behind. And that's why we're talking about travel. Although we cannot physically travel, but we are traveling in our minds and hearts, and we are constantly learning about destinations. And I guess what's super important for me is the fact that travel is changing us, our perspective, and again, gives us different experiences that we're not going to get any other way. So I will tell you a little bit about myself. I have the next slide. I don't know what this like Canada thing is here.
I think when somebody typed in where they were from, it somehow ended up on the screen.
And I don't know how to get rid of that. Yeah, it's all there. It's cool. A little bit about myself. My name is Leila Levy. For those of you who don't know me, I am founder and owner of a boutique travel concierge, but I live and breathe travel because that's something that I love and I'm so passionate about. My background is actually engineering and technology, but I left that to pursue my passion in the travel space because I love to travel and I love to share that passion and that excitement of travel with others. And I found that traveling and putting it all together, all the aspect of travel is so time consuming, so hard, and just people don't have all the expertise to put it together. So I have a small team of people that we help mainly with customized itineraries and plan and take care of all the details. And most importantly, it's so personalized, so it's not pigeonholing people into something that they're really not excited about. And on the other side, I also help with any kind of travel as well, or a mixture of customized and some other package tours. But one of the more important things that I decided to talk about Antarctica, and even more important than that, the sustainability aspect of it, is because sustainability is at the core and at the forefront of what I do and what I believe in. You probably would remember that towards the end of March, towards the end of April, we had Earth Day. And if you haven't, for those of you who are not really receiving my newsletter, I shared 5 tips for sustainability travel. So tonight, we are going to not only travel to Antarctica, we're going to learn how to travel in a sustainable fashion. And without further ado, I wanted to introduce you to Kristen Ers, our lovely guide for tonight to take us to Antarctica with Hertogrutten.
Thank you very much, Layla, and thank you very much, everybody who's joining us this evening virtually. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and it sounds like from, many different parts of the world, so that is fantastic. My name is Kristen. I'm the sales director in Canada for a wonderful company named Hurtigruten. I'm going to take you a little bit through who we are, what we represent, what expedition cruising is all about, and then we will spend the second half of the presentation delving into what it's like to travel to Antarctica, the seventh continent, that bucket list that some of you may be dying to tick off of your bucket list.
Kristen, I don't have your video. I don't know if you're
Sorry,
sharing.
I can turn my video on, no problem.
Yes.
There we go. So people always, I think, look at our name and think, okay, first of all, how do you pronounce it? What does it mean? It is Hurtigruten, as we say here, maybe in North America. The proper Norwegian pronunciation is Hurtigruten. It means fast route or express route. And our origins date back actually to 1893. We are over 127 years old. Our founder is Captain Richard With, and our first ship, the DS Vesteralen. Captain Richard With was the first to create a steamship route entirely along the coast of Norway, all the way up north above the Arctic Circle, where very few steamships of the past, especially year-round, would, kind of avoid traversing, because there were very few lighthouses above the Arctic Circle, especially in wintertime. The sea conditions can be very rough, but we are, and still today, and we were back then, an essential service, delivering the mail, delivering supplies, things like food, all along the coast. And today we are still somewhat of a ferry service, still servicing from Bergen up to Kirkenes. And we still today deliver people, deliver cars, deliver supplies. And as well, we do have, the tourist aspect of it as well, that people come on to enjoy the coastal voyage, to learn a little bit more about the Norwegian way of life, and of course, to get to see the beautiful landscapes along the way. So that's just a little bit into our history. So what makes cruising with us different? If you have been on some of the large cruise lines, maybe Princess or Royal Caribbean, elements you might be used to are things like casinos and Broadway shows, and maybe game shows and sports courts and that sort of thing. We're quite a different experience on board, and there is a product out there for everybody. I'm a firm believer of that. We do have a more educational focus on board our ships. We like to sort of make the ship a further extension of the destination that we are sailing in. Our hosts on board, instead of what you might be used to, like a cruise director or an entertainment staff, our hosts are your expedition team. They are trained biologists, marine biologists, historians, ornithologists. They help share the story of the places that we travel to and educate our guests on board with regards to the landscapes, the wildlife that we will be encountering during one of our voyages. We as a company, especially, instead of investing in, the bigger, the better, water slides, all of that things, we put our investments into things like green and sustainable technology. Because we sail in such environmentally sensitive regions of the world, we want to make sure that we are leaving no footprint behind from where we are traveling to. So we are polar pioneers. It is very important when you're considering traveling, especially to the polar regions, that you look to an operator that has a lot of experience in these regions. There are a lot of safety measures, rules and regulations, tests that we need to pass, certain operational procedures that we need to be following in order to be able to operate in these destinations. And the beauty part is we've been doing it for over 127 years, sailing year-round in polar waters. So it really is, it does mean something to be able to travel to the polar regions with those that really are a part of creating the foundation for what it means to actually be operating in these polar regions. We are the largest expedition cruise company in the world, both by number of ships, by market share, and by the number of different itineraries that we have to offer. We do take you to the polar regions, but of course we do fill in between the poles as well. Different, Canada, USA, Central, South America itineraries, because of course we need to get the ships from one pole down to the other. So there are some great ways to explore the inner workings between the poles as well. Well, we are the greenest cruise line in the world, and that really is at the heart of how we operate as a company. You may or may not recognize this handsome gentleman. This is Roald Amundsen, and actually at the age of 10 in his diary, he had written, "In my imagination, I created an electric ship that could break through all kinds of ice, that nice and elegantly, fearful and irresistible, could sail through Arctic oceans." And I am so pleased to say that last year, Hurtigruten created the ship after Roald Amundsen. It is the world's first hybrid electric powered ship. We are so pleased to have been able to really bring Roald Amundsen's dream to reality. And actually earlier in this year, we introduced her sister hybrid ship, the Fridtjof Nansen. So this is just the start of the technology that we are using going forward in how we actually fuel and operate our ships. So yes, we do have batteries on board. And as much as you might be used to, seeing a large computer server, the batteries on board look very much like that, just a giant wall of batteries. And they are continually operating, and they are actually used in place of, increasing extra RPMs. We turn the batteries on instead of using more fuel. So they constantly fluctuate with our engines. And even when we are close to shore, which is great when we're in places like Antarctica, for example, we do have the ability to completely shut the engines off and just run strictly on battery power. So imagine, being close to shore, there might be a pod of whales swimming nearby, and there's just something so magical about being able to, view them from your ship in completely silent, a very silent experience. It really does enhance, your wildlife viewing opportunities when you're in these destinations.
Kirsten, if
So
you don't
with our
mind, so there are some people asking some questions, so I wanted to clarify a few things.
Sure.
One of the things that you need to know for travel to Antarctica is the understanding around expedition cruising concept. So and I probably should have mentioned that at the beginning, that what we are going to share is, first of all, what do you need? How do you travel to Antarctica? And what does that expedition cruising look like? And then we're going to dive into the actual Antarctica piece. So, and then we are going to have a Q&A towards the end of the presentation.
Yes, no problem. Yes, I will get into all that, don't worry. So with our existing fleet, for those that aren't currently hybrid electric powered, we are in the process of converting them over to a liquefied biofuel. And believe it or not, it is actually made from waste from the fishing and forestry industries. So yes, ultimately we are fueling our fish or our ships with dead fish. And what's amazing about this, we recently, at the end of last year, converted our ship, the Polaris, over, and it reduced her operating emissions by 80%. With the potential to get up to 95%, once we kind of work out the kinks and work out the different adjustments. We as a company have the goal, have the aim to be 100% emission free in our operations. That is our goal, to be the first cruise line to have that sort of stamp to our name. The technology doesn't currently exist in order to be able to do that, but we are hoping, you know, in the next 5 to maybe 7 to 10 years that we will be able to have that opportunity. And that's the great thing about Hurtigruten, is their continual opportunities to be investing in and looking for new technologies for us to be able to reduce our operating emissions. We were the first major travel company and first cruise line to completely ban single-use plastics across our entire fleet. We did that over 2 years ago now, and it actually started as an idea on board by one of our expedition team members. And once that idea was presented to our CEO, within a 4-month short time span, we were able to find alternative uses for these single-use plastics, and we were able to get rid of them completely from our ships. So one of the things that we do offer our guests is when we are in places like the Arctic up in Svalbard, or maybe sailing through the Northwest Passage, or along the coast of Greenland, or down in the Falkland Islands, for example, we will take our guests ashore to do things like beach cleans. Unfortunately, the way, you know, certain winds and tides work in the ocean, they are pushing a lot of the waste that is in the ocean up into these, you know, northern and southern islands. And most of these places are uninhabited, and unfortunately can be a detriment to the wildlife that lives there. And of course, you know, those that are living in the ocean as well, the fish, the whales, they can all get affected by the garbage and the waste. So we try to do our part with our guests and the nation that we're able to, and we collect this, bring it on board our ship, and then we dispose of it properly at the end of our voyage. So it's just one of the ways that we get our guests involved in our sustainable opportunities on board. So one of the beauty parts about who we are as a company and our small ships is that we do have the ability to bring you a lot closer, where the other ships, the larger ships, can't necessarily go. And that's, you know, sort of the start and the beauty of what expedition cruising is all about. Because yes, we have our very capable polar ice class ships, but then we have the use of our smaller explorer boats to, excuse me, get you even closer to shore, even closer to wide, and really immerse yourself in the destinations. And we do this all on board our beautiful ships. We like to call these your base camp at sea. You know, you might be, it's our version of, you know, that safe, cozy place to go at the end of a, you know, a busy and active or a relaxing day on board. We've got beautiful suites, beautiful balcony staterooms, ocean view staterooms, especially this ship here, the Roald Amundsen. We don't have any inside staterooms on these ships. We try wherever possible to make sure that you always have access to a view, especially when you're in the dining rooms or when you're up in the Explorer Lounge, because at any minute, especially with where we sail, we realize that wildlife opportunities are abound in these places. So we want to make sure that you always have access to sight lines to the outside. So just to take you a little bit through, you know, what the idea of expedition cruising is all about. How is it different than what you might be used to from some of the larger cruise lines? First and foremost, most importantly, of course, is we have to keep our ships small. Not just for, you know, the ease of getting our passengers on and off and out in these smaller explorer boats, but also a lot of the destinations that we visit, it is a regulation, it is a requirement to keep your passengers capped at a certain amount depending where you are. And you'll see why that's important when it comes to a place like Antarctica, which I will get into the different ship category levels once we get a little further down. For us, our itineraries and the destinations that we visit are inspired by the exploration spirits of the past. So Roald Amundsen, for example, a Norwegian explorer, the first to make it down to the South Pole, the first to make it to the North Pole, and the first to make it all the way through the Northwest Passage. So darn right, he deserves a ship to be named after him. People like Shackleton, for example, we do try to make a landing at Grytviken in South Georgia, you know, to see where Shackleton's grave is, where he is actually buried. One of the places we had the opportunity to do some scenic cruising near in Elephant Island was in Point Wild, where Shackleton actually where his ship unfortunately went under, and him and a few of his men with their 3 little tender boats went ashore and actually overwintered there while Shackleton went off to find help. So these are the types of sites that we get to visit when we are visiting places like Antarctica, and we're following the history of explorers past, and maybe recreating some of the moments where they are exploring, have overwintered, and that sort of thing. So that is a lot of what our exploration opportunities are about. It is, of course, getting off the beaten path, getting to these remote destinations, and a lot of places that we do go are not necessarily inhabited. Yes, in places like Alaska, along the coast of Canada, the East Coast, there are people, but up in Svalbard, there's very few communities. Down in Antarctica, there are no communities. We may visit the odd research base, but they are not permanent residents. They're not there all the time. So part of the beauty of it is just getting to explore the natural wild as it exists. As you heard me mention previously, there is more of an educational focus on board. We call it edutainment. So you won't see things like Broadway shows on our ships. You will have, documentaries that reflect the destination that we're sailing. We do a lecture series on board. Our ships, the Amundsen and the Nansen, have science centers where you can actually go out in our science boat and look at phytoplankton samples underneath the microscope, look at ice samples to see how, all the different, crystallizations within the ice under the microscope. So it's more of a hands-on experience, an interactive experience, as well as just to enjoy learning and listening about, the history and the destinations of where we are. And I think the most important thing when you are going into an expedition cruise is knowing that the schedule is always flexible and you need to travel with an open mind. Most important points to getting the best and most understanding out of what expedition cruising is about. Because what you'll probably notice is if you look at an actual itinerary on our website for Antarctica, it might say, day 1 to 2 embarkation and say Punta Arenas, day 3 to 4 crossing the Drake Passage, day 5 through 12 Antarctica, and then the voyage ends after that. And people look at it and say, okay, day 5 to 12 Antarctica. Well, what exactly are you doing in Antarctica? And the reason we don't display, the landing site specifically or anything like that prior to your departure is because everything really ultimately is in the control of Mother Nature. It is in the control of the sea ice conditions. How much ice is in the water? Can we actually traverse to the landing sites that we hope to get to, or do we need to change the plan because there was too much ice or because Mother Nature wasn't maybe that kind to us? The other beauty part about expedition cruising is because the schedule is flexible, it means that we can change our plans to take advantage of different opportunities. So our plan might not have been to sail through the Lemaire Channel, but if the opportunity is there and the ice conditions are clear that we could be going, the great thing is we can change our schedule and do something like that, to make the best of the moment. So that really is the best way to understand what it's like to go into an expedition. Yes, we hope that plan A will work out, but you may wake up the next day and we've moved on to plan B or even plan C to make sure that, of course, first and foremost, our guests are safe. Safety, of course, is always the number one. But of course, that we're taking advantage of the best opportunities that we can for the destinations that we're visiting. So you heard me mention that our expedition team, they are our hosts on board the ship. We have over 150 of them across our fleet, and they are from all over the world. And as I mentioned, they are educated professionals. So in their past lives, they might have PhDs in geology and have decided to, share their knowledge with us as expedition team members on board our ships. And of course, they are highly trained in polar survival. We do encounter, very different weather conditions than what we might be used to in our day-to-day lives. We have, of course, encountered different wildlife that we need to be aware of for safety measures, like the polar bear, for example. When we are up in Svalbard, our expedition team members will actually go ashore first to make sure that there are no polar bears in the landing site that we expect to go to, because as much as we as tourists want to see the polar bear, ultimately that for safety purposes is not possible in terms of landing where they might already be. Safety first. So it's making sure that we are aware of all of the surroundings and have the proper safety precautions before we do go into any type of landing. So what are the things that are included in your expedition? From a culinary perspective, we always say expedition takes priority over mealtime. So you might notice even throughout the same voyage that the timings of your meals might vary day to day based on what's happening ashore, especially if it comes to the point where, we have a great opportunity for weather. So we want to take advantage of it. We might push breakfast an hour later that day because we want to make sure that we can get our guests out to enjoy the conditions while we have them. So breakfast and lunch will remain buffet style so that we have that ease of moving people in and out in a more relaxed and casual type of structure. And then in the evening time, we do dinner either as buffet. If we do have landings and things going on in the evening time, we do keep it more casual with buffet. We do offer a 4-course seated a la carte meal if we're not doing any landings or scenic cruising in the evening. And if the weather is great, we do offer open deck barbecues as well. I just recently got off of a trip actually to Antarctica, and we had about 3 just beautiful late afternoon days, and that was the days they decided, yep, let's just go up on deck. We're going to do a barbecue, reindeer sausage, the whole, the whole with all the fixings and everything like that. It was such an amazing opportunity to be able to take advantage of that as it was happening. So things like coffee, tea, water, always available and always included. We do have refillable water stations throughout the ship for your use. House wine, beer, pop, and mineral water are included in the restaurants for lunch and dinner. For any early risers, we do have, coffees and pastries available between that kind of 5 a.m. onwards time period. And in the afternoon, maybe after you've been out doing activity, we'll do an afternoon treat up in one of the lounges. It might be a version of afternoon tea or, some meat, cheeses, baguettes, that type of thing. And gratuities are not expected on board. You might be used to with some of the larger cruise lines, maybe a set per day gratuity, or they charge you in advance for the gratuities. We don't do either of those things. It's not the Norwegian way of life to tip, so we pass that concept onto our ships. It is completely up to the guest if they choose to or not on board. We will not come hunting you down for any gratuities. So onboard engagement. So with our expedition team being on board, they do offer a series of lectures throughout the trip. And they do these, of course, in between the times when we are doing landings so that you're not going to miss, a lecture while you're out doing scenic cruising. Everything is timed very nicely to work in sync with each other. So we do talk about, of course, the destinations and maybe specific themes tied to the destination where we might be. We do talk about, the realities of climate change, sustainability, polar history, different cultures depending on where we might be sailing. And one of the things we do to get our guests more engaged is we offer a citizen science program. So these are different activities that are held on board the ship. There's no cost or anything for them. You can just sign up and participate with them, and they're just listed in the daily program. I think one of my favorite citizen science programs is the partnership that we have with Happy Whale. So you as a guest, if you take a picture of a whale tail while you are on our trip, we can actually submit that whale tail to Happy Whale. And you got to remember the whale's tail is like our version of fingerprints. So that is their identifying marker. So the whale tail gets submitted to Happy Whale, and from the picture that you have sent them, they can identify obviously the type of whale that it is, approximately how old that whale might be, if that whale has been spotted in the past, and other guests like ourselves have reported this same whale in the past, where it has been swimming, where it is migrating to, approximately its age, and each whale is assigned a name. And what's sort of neat is that if you submit a photo of a whale that they have never reported to them in the past, you get to be the one to name the whale, and that whale will continue on forever with the name that you provided it. And then even cooler still is even after you've left our voyage, you can still opt in to email updates about your whale. So you can follow the life of your whale even after you've left the trip. So it's sort of a nice way to keep yourself tied to the voyage for the long run. We do offer introductory photo lectures on board. With some of the places that we go, I mean, the landscapes, the wildlife opportunities for photography are just enormous. And what I personally love is that we do have a photographer on board each one of our ships. And their sole purpose is to help everybody on board, of course, you know, because some people come with lenses as long as their arms, but they may not necessarily know how to use them. So our professional photographer is there to help you, you know, get the right angles. How do you catch the image of a bird, you know, that might be flying in the air following the ship? And they also capture the entire trip themselves. So at the end of the trip, they offer a USB that you can purchase either low res or high res of all of the photos that they have captured throughout their entire journey. We offer free Wi-Fi on board for all guests, keeping in mind, of course, we do sail in, you know, some remote regions, and Wi-Fi isn't always available. The funny thing is, I was up in Svalbard last summer, and unless we were pretty close to Longyearbyen, which is the main port there, we pretty much didn't get Wi-Fi for most of the trip. And I must be honest, it was so nice to be forced to completely disconnect. But then on the opposite extreme, my trip down to Antarctica just over a month ago, we had great Wi-Fi. So I really can't tell you why the reasoning is or where we're going to get great Wi-Fi or not, but it is there. It is available for your use where and when it's working. So everybody always wants to know, so what's the gear that you're going to need when you're doing any type of sort of expedition cruising? On board Hurtigruten, everybody does get a expedition jacket, and that is sort of your top water and wind resistant layer that you can put over top of your own layers underneath. And this is your souvenir as well to take home with you at the end of the trip. So we size you up for this jacket on board. Especially when we're in the polar regions, we also provide you with our Hurtigruten muck boots. So these are very thick, rubber treaded boots that will keep your feet dry. It'll keep them warm. And these are sort of specially created to help in polar regions where you are, you know, possibly walking through water, through ice, through snow, through a lot of penguin poop. That is a reality. So these boots are there, and it just is one less large thing that you need to be packing with you for your trip. Everybody will also have the use of our trekking poles. So if we are doing, you know, maybe any walks that might have icy layers or maybe, you know, rockiness just to help steady your footing, the expedition team brings all of the gear ashore for us. So we don't need to worry about, you know, trying to sit in the Explorer boat holding all of these things. They bring all the gear ashore, they bring all the gear back to the ship, and we can just pick up our set of poles and continue on our way. Everybody also gets the Hurtigruten reusable water bottle, so you can fill that up around the ship at the water stations as well. And again, your souvenir to take home with you. And then if any of you are familiar with, you know, cruising on the larger ships and the tender boats that they use, they're usually, you know, white and orange and are covered on the top. So the boats that you see here, one might refer to them as Zodiacs. We don't use the brand name Zodiac, so we call them Explorer boats. So this is actually our version of what a tender boat looks like. And these we use to get you from the ship to shore. We also use these for scenic cruising opportunities. So we might, you know, take a group out in our boats and get the opportunity to sail really close to some icebergs or to some glaciers coming down the mountains. It really gives you that open air opportunity to get great shots, be really up close and personal, you know, with your surroundings. And I'd say some of the best whale encounters we have had have been in these Explorer boats. So you heard me mention the term a landing, and what a landing essentially is, especially in these places that are uninhabited, is that we take our Explorer boats and we literally land them on land. I know it's a very formal term. Because we don't always have access to docks or ports or cities to be able to pull up to, so we just have to make the best of what land has to offer us to bring our boats ashore so that our guests can come ashore and do hiking and exploring. And then the other opportunity, of course, with our boats is going out and doing the scenic cruising. And I think this picture down here in the bottom right is a perfect example of what it means to get out and do ice cruising and be up close and personal, you know, with icebergs that, especially when you're down at that water level, just completely tower over you. I mean, you just can't believe, you know, the size of them when you just feel so small when you are in those little boats. But it's a great way to be getting up close with your destination. So everybody always wants to know, you know, how difficult is it to get in and out of the boats? And the nice thing is the way that the Hurtigruten ships are designed is that the hull of our ship actually folds out flat as a platform, and it is water level with our boats. So we can actually just pull our boats right up, and then we have people on the ship and in our boat to help you get in and out. There are always helping hands around to make sure, of course, number one, that you're safe and that you're comfortable getting in and out of the Explorer boats. And that's just another view of them. And then a couple of the different types of landings that we get to do. So if we are lucky, we do have a dry landing where there might be, you know, a wooden pier or a small dock that we do get to pull up to, as you can see down in the bottom left-hand corner there. Quite often we do encounter wet landings. So we are essentially pulling our Explorer boats up to almost the side of a beach. So we will bring out stairs, or sometimes you will twist your body and put your feet right in the water, depending how deep it is. And that's where you can tell that the muck boots come in handy, because yes, there are instances where we're getting in and out of the boats and you might be standing in a couple feet of polar water in order to get from the boat ashore. Or my favorite landing is a polar landing where there is so much snow and ice there that our expedition team will actually go ashore first and literally dig out a set of stairs with a shovel to create this landing platform for us to be able to bring our Explorer boat up to for our guests to walk off and up onto shore. And what I love about the polar landing sites when we are near penguin colonies is once we are done for the day and we're clearing away from the landing site, you can usually see the penguins now have started to use the set of stairs to get in and out of the water in the polar landing site. They're very creative, curious creatures, and why not use something that has just been made perfect for them there. So how we do an actual landing. So with everybody on board, you are broken up into boat groups. And to be fun, we like to name the boat groups after different wildlife, especially in places like Antarctica. So everybody rotates through landings and ice cruising with the same boat group every day. And so you may go out the first time on the first day, but then you'll go second, third, fourth. So everybody will have had a chance to go out and do a landing first, last, somewhere in the middle, so that it's always even in terms of, fairness of who's going out, who, goes last, who goes first, that sort of thing. And it also lets you know approximately what time you will be going out. So you're not just standing around for an hour waiting for your boat group to go. You will know the schedule prior to doing a landing, so that, okay, if you're in the first, like for example, this one here, I was a giant petrel for this particular landing, or for that particular trip. And so the petrels group, we were going out at 4:30. And then, maybe the penguin groups were going out at 4:45. So everything gets staggered, so you know approximately within a few minutes when you're going out, so that you don't have to sit around the ship completely geared up with everything on and sweating. You will get some opportunity just to hang out on the ship. You'll hear your name called, and then you can come down and take part in the landing. So one thing we do, the expedition team does when they go ashore to set up a landing, is they actually bring survival gear with them. So if by chance we happen to get stuck ashore, we do have supplies like polar suits, fresh water, camping equipment, food, just in the off chance something may happen that we are stuck ashore and unable to get back to the ship. Don't worry though, this has not happened for any large period of time so far. The one group of people actually that had experienced something like this was our expedition team. They were ashore, I think the time frame was about 9 hours that they were stuck ashore on their own, because when they went to set up the landing site, all of these little icebergs within that kind of first half hour to an hour literally blocked the landing site and their explorer boats and them being ashore from the ship. So we couldn't get any of our explorer boats ashore, and we couldn't get the expedition team back to the ship. So that's the longest we've had anybody ashore, and it was our expedition team for that 9-hour time period. But that is part of the reason why we do bring ashore with each of our landings all of this survival gear in the off chance something like that does happen. But when an expedition team is setting up the landing site, you can see that there's different cones here, and they will use flags as well. And they will actually kind of mark out the landing site before we as guests go ashore, especially if there are things like seals nearby. And sometimes the seals are nasty and we shouldn't be getting too close to them. We want to make sure that we are maintaining a safe distance away. So that's the purpose of them, highlighting different areas where we can walk safely by the cones and the flags, so that we aren't disturbing any of the, maybe nesting areas of birds or seals that, we just don't want to get too close to them anyway. So that's, they go ashore, set up the landing site, and then we will start our operations of bringing our guests ashore. So Layla, I think we've got a poll in here.
I think we have to go faster because the second half of the conversation, it's going to be mainly around Antarctica.
Yes.
And we haven't even touched the actual Antarctica piece yet.
That's okay. No worries.
So yeah, so let's just go. Let's just move to the next slide and talking about Antarctica. But I'm just hoping that by now you got some sort of understanding that Antarctica is not your typical get on a cruise, let's go, let's bring that fancy dress and those ties and all the other dress shoes that people take with them when they travel. This is especially Antarctica, and the expedition cruising is for adventurous people, for those who want to learn. And the whole experience on the cruise ship is very different. It's around education, science, and learning about animals. And as Kristen also mentioned, a lot of people on the ship are marine biologists, or people who are coming from a scientific geologist background. So it's very, very different than your regular cruising. And I get a lot of times, and I guess that's why it's so important to set that expectation that, you know, like you're going to the coldest, windiest, highest, driest continent on Earth. And even so I will be talking in some of the slides about and sometimes it's a little bit bumpy road to get into Antarctica, so it's not such a straightforward destination, but you need to know about all of those stuff and about that open mind that, you know, the plan A may not work out and you have to stick to plan B based on the weather and the conditions of that day. So moving forward, talking about Antarctica specifically, why, again, reminder of why do you want to travel to this beautiful land? Sorry, can you go back, Kristen, to the previous slide? I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you're going to Antarctica because you want to experience a different type of adventure that you haven't traveled before. You are going to see animal, and you are closest to nature as you could possibly be. And this is a part of planet that not too many people actually travel. So, and we've covered a lot about that kind of like expedition cruising aspect to set that expectation before you actually even like think about traveling to Antarctica. So moving forward to some other activities and adventures in Antarctica, it's so interesting that even landing in Antarctica is quite an adventure. It's, as Kristen showed you, the different types of landing and how the expedition team is going first, and they are setting up before you actually land. So it's a little bit more adventure type of travel. Kayaking, hiking on this the last continent of this planet, and going with small boat cruising, going through and seeing all those icebergs, or seeing penguins, seals, whales closer enough, or snowshoeing. And I guess one of the other things that stands out for me from one of those adventures unique to Antarctica is the idea of camping on the Antarctica Peninsula. Polar plunge is something that it's become a sort of like a tradition for people who are traveling to that part. And again, going back to the science and the lectures, and a lot of people are going there because they love to learn about the environment, animals, biology, and a lot of things about the planet. So next one of the things that it's a question that a lot of people ask. It's, when is the best time to travel to Antarctica? And we are going to talk about this in a little bit more detail, but at the very high level, you need to know which of these categories is important for you, and what do you want it to see? Do you want to see so depending on so if you're going, basically there is three main time, and the only time to travel to Antarctica is during the summer Arctic time, and that's typically between October and November till February, March. So early summertime, you're going to see it's a mating season for seals and penguins. They're building the nests in penguin colonies, and around December, January time, um, that's when hatching penguins happen. So you see a lot of penguins chicks, seals, fur seals, pups in South Georgia, and it's the warmest and longest days in Antarctica. And then in February, March time, it's the best time to see the whale watching, and that's the beautiful sunset. So it depends on what criteria you have in mind. Do you want it to see when icebergs are untouched? There is a beautiful snow on the ground, or on our Antarctica. That would be your kind of like earlier time in the season. Or if you wanted to see during this hatching or penguin chicks, that would be around middle summertime. And then if you go later on, obviously Kristen mentioned a lot about, you see a lot of snow is actually turned purple because of penguin poops. So it's very different what you're looking for, and we'll be talking about this in a little bit more detail. But let's talk about, so I'm a very visual person. So back to next slide. I wanted to even give you a little background on when we're talking about Antarctica, what does that really mean? And some of you may have heard the concept of Drake Passage. And so if you consider, so this is sort of like Antarctica, and here is Argentina and Chile, up here north, very north of Antarctica, and here is the Antarctica Circle. And this is what is called Antarctica Peninsula, and the others are smaller islands. So that's sort of like the high level of how Antarctica has been described. One of the interesting things about Drake Passage, which is here, so south of Argentina, Chile, and on your way to get to Antarctica, and that's where the Atlantic, Pacific, and Southern Seas converge, and there is basically no resistance from any of those land masses. There is this whole area that there is like different oceans converging, and that's where there some choppiest water in the world. And there is depends on, some people have a very smooth sailing, some people it's a little bit not very smooth. So that's one of the things that you need to prepare yourself for traveling to Antarctica. And so here are some of the other islands, and there are two other main islands that are very famous, Falkland Island and South Georgia, that I just wanted to briefly mention some of those. And one of the other things that I personally love a lot is the Lumiere Channel, which is here, which is one of the, obviously, as you can imagine, you get a beautiful scenery, as they call it, Kodak Gap, because it's a beautiful area of scenery as you're going through that channel of water. And depends on where you are going, you will see different things. So for example, the Half Moon Island, there is a photogenic island, and you see a lot of clips and large colony of chinstrap penguins. And so these depends on where you're going, you're seeing pretty much different types of penguin that we have. We're going to cover more of that in the remainder of our conversation.
Okay. So I'm just going to take you through sort of the regulations and different types of rules that we have to follow when we're operating in Antarctica. And these are actually just a couple of my photos from the recent trip that I did there. And it's always funny because I remember hearing people saying, well, if you've been to Antarctica, you have absolutely no idea how to explain it. And I finally understand that now, having been there. It is such, I mean, using the words of Anthony Bourdain, it really is a place that changes you. And I think just changes your whole perspective on what it means to really just be in a place by yourself. I mean, it's quiet down there, except I should say by when you're near the penguins. It's not quiet when you're near the penguins. But there's just this sense of calm being down there, and just knowing that you're one of few that have ever been down there to begin with. I even struggle still with how to really explain what the experience is like, because it pulls you, I find, in so many different emotional ways, and in all good ways, I promise, with the types of experiences that you get to have down here. And I mean, these are just things that, this just floats by you on your ship as we were sailing through the gullet. And this iceberg here, it's actually named A68A. It broke off from the ice sheet. You could literally land a 747 plane on this iceberg. It's a tabular iceberg. You only get tabular iceberg when you're down in Antarctica. And we just so happened to come up on this iceberg with a beautiful sunset. And again, it's one of those moments where it's that aha moment that you can't believe it's happening. You'll probably never see this again in your life, but you are in the moment, you appreciate the moment, and hopefully you can capture a great photo like this to know that it happened. But just speaking with that idea of going in with the open mind and the flexibility, because even to go to Antarctica once, you can have a completely different experience the second time around, because the schedule is so flexible and so fluid, and based on, the opportunities that present itself. So it really is the type of place you could go back to time and time again and have a very different experience each time that you go back. This was one of our scenic cruising opportunities that we had the chance to do in Port Charcot. And there are quite a few abandoned research stations, and some of them are actually open, that we can go into them and just see some of the remnants of, science centers of past days from, the 1940s, the 1960s. It really is just sort of a walk through time and through history with a lot of these different landing sites that we get to visit. And of course, the penguins. Who doesn't love the penguins? That's most of, I think, the main reason that a lot of people choose to go down to Antarctica, is to view all of the penguin wildlife, which I'll explain who does live down in Antarctica. But first, the Antarctic Treaty. So this was signed December 1st, 1959. And this was to follow the premise that Antarctica will remain uninhabited. Nobody takes ownership over it. And it just stays as a place for peace, for science, for research. And thankfully today, that is still the case. And this is a treaty signed by over 50 countries. Now, there are seasonal research inhabitants down in Antarctica, but nobody permanently lives down on the Antarctic continent. And part of the regulations for how we are able to operate in Antarctica is through the International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators. So we have to be a member of IATO, and we actually have tests and certain rules and things that we need to follow and we need to pass before they give us permission each year in order to sail down in this region. And we actually we do have a hand as an operator in setting these types of guidelines and these rules. So we really do become a part of the whole operation from beginning to finish. One of the things we have to be aware of, especially in a place like Antarctica and up in the Arctic as well, is biosecurity, and making sure that we are not introducing any type of contamination or anything foreign to this new destination that we're visiting. So one of the things we have our guests do when you first get on board is we send you through our little vacuuming station. So any of the outer layers that you are going to be wearing when you go off to do a landing, you go through and you vacuum all of those. So get out any lint, any cat hair, for me, for example. If you have a leaf or a twig or something stuck maybe in the cuff of your pants, We want to make sure all of that stuff is removed before we go ashore, so that it doesn't introduce anything foreign to the continent of Antarctica. And then on an even deeper level, with our boots, before we go ashore, we do go through a disinfectant. And then when we come back onto the ship after being ashore, we actually walk through what I to make sure that we have washed off all of the remnants that might have collected on our boots from when we were ashore, like penguin poop, for example. That's a very common thing. So all these things to make sure that we are protecting and leaving nothing behind from where we are visiting. And of course, not introducing anything from where we are visiting, taking nothing. As tempting as that rock might be, you leave it where it is. Nothing from the destination comes back onto the ship. We leave nothing but footprints behind from where we've been. So that's part of the disinfecting process that we go through when we are in places like Antarctica. And then, of course, some of the other rules we have to follow is making sure that we maintain a safe distance from wildlife. Now, the official rule is 5 meters that we have to stay away, from the wildlife, but it doesn't always mean the wildlife knows the rules, especially in a place when you're doing a landing with penguins, for example. They are very confident characters. They don't have any major land predators. So to us, we are sort of like they're, just any other big penguin to them. So it is very likely that a penguin will come up to you, and us as guests in their home, it is up to us just to leave the penguin to do its thing. One of my colleagues, actually, his life jacket straps was actually flowing and flapping in the wind, and a penguin came up to him and was trying to grab the life jacket strap in its beak and literally playing with it like a cat would play with a string. So that type of interaction can happen, and it's just up to us to let them do their thing. Avoid the temptation of touching, and they do eventually wander off. And I think, too, it's a perfect example with these two little guys here on the right. This little fur seal pup actually got so tuckered out, it took a nap on our boot cleaning brush when we had all of the expedition gear ashore. And this Gen 2 penguin chick decided that the duffel bag was a perfect spot to sit and have an afternoon nap as well. So wildlife interactions are quite common. Of course, we do still follow the rules, understanding that sometimes, especially the penguins, do tend to break those rules, and we just have to follow their lead and let them do their thing. So as Layla had mentioned, there are different types of itineraries that you can do in Antarctica. Ours range in length from 12 up to 23 days, depending what else you do want to see on top of the Antarctic Peninsula. So if your interest is just Antarctica, then I recommend our shortest itinerary, 12 days, and you'll see the little airplanes on our itineraries. And that's because we include a charter flight to get you from either Buenos Aires or Santiago, depending on the itinerary you choose. Everybody flies down to the ship together. Everybody departs the ship together to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind. And I think that's most important because, once that ship leaves for Antarctica, there is no catching up with it at another port of call. Once it's gone, it's gone. It's not like another itinerary where maybe you've missed the ship in Florida, so you're going to try and fly to Nassau, Bahamas to catch up with that. We can't do that here. So that's why we include the charter flight already included in the price of our packages to get you to and from the ship with everybody, so everybody stays together and we know that everybody's gotten on board. Layla had mentioned the Drake Passage, and we have little terms for the Drake Passage. We call it either Drake Lake or Drake Shake. You could experience either one of those. I have had the do we call it opportunity to experience both of them? So I'll just leave.
It's once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yes,
actually.
Exactly.
It's probably the only place in on this planet that this could happen.
Yeah. And so if you want to take the 18-day itinerary on top of course, visiting the Antarctic Peninsula, we do include the Chilean fjords. And part of the reason we start in and out of Punta Arenas is for the hopeful opportunity of doing a landing at actual Cape Horn. So there is a monument sort of on the top of the cliff at Cape Horn to commemorate sailors of past days that have lost their lives trying to sail around Cape Horn. But we always say, especially with Cape Horn, there's a 1 in 5 chance that your landing will actually happen. So again, it's part of that expectation of going into expedition cruising and that particular itinerary. We also add the Falkland Islands on top of that as well. We do spend up to 3 days in the Falklands because although yes, there is the main port of Stanley, which some of the larger cruise ships visit, we actually also go to places like New Island, West Point Island, Saunders Island. So these are usually maybe inhabited by one family or one couple who are preserving the island, and they invite our guests ashore. They usually serve us coffee and tea and cookies, you know, that they've made themselves. And they usually are home to their own sheep, but also tons of penguin and albatross wildlife as well. So that's one of the beauties of including the Falkland Islands in your itinerary. And then the longest itinerary, so you'll have Antarctica, you'll have the Falklands, and the addition to that is South Georgia. So anybody who's familiar with the Galapagos Islands, South Georgia can be compared to that in an Antarctic version. You know, there's unique wildlife there, particularly if your interest is the king penguins. So these are, you know, the penguins that stand about 4 feet tall. I think the funny thing is when a lot of people see a picture of Antarctica, it's usually the king penguins that people use to advertise. And the king penguins actually cannot be found on the Antarctic Peninsula or the continent. They only exist on the island of South Georgia, or if you're lucky, there's a couple small colonies up in the Falkland Islands. So if that is, you know, the type of penguin that you are really hoping to see, you want to make sure you take the longest itinerary, as that will be the guaranteed sighting of the king penguins. So size does matter when you're taking a trip to Antarctica.
Can I just add, can I just one point,
yeah.
Kristen, can you go back to the previous slide? I just wanted to highlight that so this is the Falkland Island, and a lot of people who love birds and birds watching, actually that's a paradise for people to go to. And a lot of people also go to South Georgia because of the whole, you know, the fjords, the mountains, the beaches, and all the penguins. So I think it's a interesting combination of one that has fjords and mountains and penguin, and the other one is also a lot of bird watchers paradise, and obviously the Antarctica, which we talked about it a little bit.
Perfect. So getting into the size of the ships. So if you are on a ship that is over 500 passengers, they do not have any regulation to be able to actually step foot on land in Antarctica. So you will see some itineraries with the larger cruise lines that might mention, you know, Antarctica cruising. Just keep in mind you're not actually stepping foot on the continent. You will just be sailing, cruising by. And the ships are not also built for these types of ice conditions and polar cruising. So you're not going to get, you know, as close to land as you will be able to on a polar class rated ship. So you want to make sure that you are on either a Category 2 or a Category 1 ship if you want to physically step foot on land. A Category ship is anywhere from 200 up to 500 passengers. For us, that is the Roald Amundsen and the Fridtjof Nansen. So we have 25 landing sites that we are able to choose from. And these ships are a 1A superclass ice strengthened hull. So we are able to break through some ice, but our ships are not ice breakers. Because we are sailing there during the Antarctic summer, our ships do not need to be icebreakers in order to still have an amazing experience. And then we've got our Category 1 ship. So this is less than 200 passengers. And for us, that is our ship, the MS From. So they have more than 25 landing sites to choose from, including South Georgia. So South Georgia is even more heavily regulated, that you need to keep your ship even smaller than that 200 guests or less is what's needed for South Georgia. And that ship is a 1B ice strengthened hull, just after her big sister ships. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking at an itinerary with over 500 passengers on that ship, you will not be making landfall on the actual continent. So some of the optional activities that we can participate in Antarctica, and things like kayaking, we can pretty much do that all season long. And we don't do kayaking just in Antarctica. We do that in pretty much all of our other destinations. But if your interest is in something like snowshoeing or camping, we do need to do those activities towards the beginning part of the year, because we need a good base of snow in order to operate those activities. So again, for something like snowshoeing, we do provide all of the gear for that. For camping, for example, again, we have to make sure we're keeping in line with our regulations that we follow with IATO. So for camping, we have a maximum of 30 people that we are able to take ashore with us to do an overnight camping experience. So it's important to know that if we have more than 30 people interested in doing the camping, there is an extra cost for it. We actually do a name draw, a lottery system on board the ship. Believe me, we would love to bring 200 people ashore to do camping, but we are not allowed to. We have to stay within the guidelines of Antarctica. So 30 people is the limit, including our 2 expedition guides that go with you. And we give you, of course, all of the camping gear. You do work on setting up your own tent with, of course, the supervision of help of our expedition team. And the expedition team does dig out an area in the snow where we put somewhat of a camping toilet as your outdoor toilet for the experience overnight. And once we are ashore, the ship leaves. The ship does not stay there. She disappears for the evening, and you are essentially alone for your overnight camping experience with your fellow guests. And if we're lucky, we are nearby a penguin colony, and they do sometimes come over to see what's happening. But just keep that in mind when it does come to camping. We hope to operate it, maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the voyage. Of course, it's always based on, weather conditions and ice conditions, that sort of thing. But what an incredible experience to say that you've overnight camped, on the continent of Antarctica. And then just a little bit more in depth about the different seasons. So the start of the season for Antarctica, that October to November time period. And I always say this is, a photographer's dream going at this time of year, because everything is relatively untouched. Still beautiful white snow, lots of sea ice, lots of, lots of penguins at that point, because they're building their nests, they're building their, they're laying eggs. And what's kind of neat is, if you're lucky, you do get to see maybe some of the Adelies where they build their nests with stones, and they actually kind of steal stones from each other. And the person who builds up the biggest nest with the best stones gets the best mate at the end of the day. And it can be quite comical to watch, a penguin drop a stone into his nest, and then when he goes away to collect more stones, another penguin goes into his nest, steals that same stone, and then puts it into his own nest to build his. So as you can imagine, some of them, it does take them quite a while to build up their nest, because they keep stealing the stones from each other. And then if you are in places like South Georgia, this is where the elephant seals are courting. We stay well away from them during mating season. They are quite big and boisterous. And of course, safety first. And of course, are laying their eggs at this time of year as well. People always want to know about, temperatures, and we are there during the Antarctic season. And I know there's a lot of Canadians on the call today. Average temperatures are anywhere between kind of -5 and 5 degrees. I think people assume, when they hear it's the coldest, windiest, place on Earth. It definitely is in the wintertime, but in the summertime, it can actually be quite mild. And it's part of the reason why when you're packing for yourself, you want to have layers, because as you are, getting active, or maybe you're hiking a little bit to see a penguin colony, or doing some snowshoeing, you'll probably find you are going to start stripping off layers, even when you are ashore. So December, January timeframe is that sweet spot if you want to be seeing the fluffy penguin chicks. You want to tailor yourself kind of towards the end of December and then into January onwards, to get kind of that prime season for penguin chicks. We do get the warmest months at this time of year and the longer days. And what's nice is because of that, sometimes we do get the opportunity to do evening landings, because heck, at 9 o'clock, it's still beautiful and sunny outside. And we can go out and maybe do a landing in the evening time. So great time of year. If penguins are really your kind of number one thing for going, this is a perfect time of year to be going. And then towards the end of the season, into that February, March time frame, this is where we are hoping the sea ice recedes enough that we can attempt to cross the Antarctic Circle. So for some, your bucket list is cross the Arctic Circle, and then of course go down to the other pole and cross the Antarctic Circle. So that's your 66 degrees south. We do have a nice little crossing ceremony. King Neptune comes, and you have to pass King Neptune's test when you cross the Antarctic Circle, and he might christen you with some polar water down your back, but he will wish us calm seas after that point. So that's one of the beauty times. If that's on your bucket list, you want to go towards the end of the season. And I always say we attempt, we will try, because again, it is all based on the sea ice conditions when we can attempt these things. Peak whale sighting season happens at this time of year, and I think this picture perfectly captures the beauty of scenic cruising and being in your explorer boat and having, a humpback whale literally coming up to get a mouthful of krill right in front of your boats. This is a great time of year to have more encounters with whales. And it is also a period where those fluffy penguin chicks, they actually start to molt. So they're losing that fluffiness and they're growing their big, tough swimming feathers. And one of the pictures I want to show you, I think these are great examples of molting in the most fashionista way you could possibly get with penguins. This little Adele here on the left, she's got, this kind of fur coat almost look going on, and then this is the perfect example of a little molting Afro penguin there. And I love showing this photo because I think it perfectly captures the exploration and pushing the boundaries when you go with Hurtigruten. And this was actually just a couple months ago in February, towards the end of the season. You can see the Roald Amundsen way down south below the Antarctic Circle. We even got down to 70 degrees south. And then you see all of the other ships kind of, up more towards the Antarctic Peninsula, but Amundsen was like, no way, we're going down, we're going to get as far south as we can possibly go. So that really does speak volumes for, the experience of our captains and our history of being in these polar waters and literally sailing to the ice edge as far as we can go. And then some of the other animals, wildlife, you'll see seals, of course. We do get the Weddell seals, the crab-eater seals, elephant seals, more so on South Georgia. And then these nasty little guys in the bottom right-hand corner, the leopard seals, they are just as nasty as they look. And we do maintain a safe distance from them. And just in case, the expedition team is on guard when they are around to make sure that they don't move, anywhere closer to our group. Now, the types of penguins that people expect. So there's 17 penguin species in the world, whether or not you knew that. And you'll probably see about 5, 6 of them if you are doing either the itinerary with the Falkland Islands or with the Falklands and South Georgia included. So this little guy here on the left, you might know him as the Happy Feet penguin from the movie. These are emperor penguins. And unfortunately, it's very rare to actually see an emperor penguin down in Antarctica. They nest very far south in the Antarctic continent, further south than the expeditions from South America can get you to. So it is actually a rare sighting that we do ever see an emperor penguin. But your most common type are these three kind of down in the middle and to the left here, your chinstrap penguin, excuse me, in the top there, your Gen 2 penguins, and of course your little Adelie penguins. They're the smallest ones in the bottom left-hand corner. And then if you do include the itineraries that visit the Falkland Islands, we get to see the southern rockhopper. And although it's not pictured here, the little Magellanic penguins as well. But if you really want to guarantee the king penguin, which is this guy here in the top right-hand corner, although there's a chance you can see them in the Falkland Islands, if you want to guarantee it, you want to be going to South Georgia. And I think this is such an amazing picture to show of what it's like to do a landing. This is St. Andrews Bay in South Georgia. There are over 500,000 breeding pairs of king penguins in this particular area. And you can see here just kind of the mix of the brown, the darker brown, and that's actually the penguin chicks. And what's amazing is when mom and dad go out into the water, you know, to get food in order to feed their chick, when they come back into the sea of other king penguins, they can literally find their own penguinship by their individual call to each other. Pretty crazy when you think of how many penguins are in this sea here. It's a pretty incredible sight. Now, most people, when they do one of these journeys, surprisingly enough, South Georgia ends up being the favorite part of their voyage. And of course, Gritvic, and I threw this in here just in the talk of South Georgia with the opportunity to see Ernest Shackleton's grave site. And then last but not least, to finish it off, we do get some incredible whale opportunities while we are down in Antarctica. The orcas, 75% of the population lives down in Antarctica full time. And of course, they do feed on things like penguins and seal, so you may end up seeing something like that, but we do get humpback whales, fin whales, right whales, and of course this picture up in the top right is a minke whale, and we've had some pretty incredible experiences with minkies interacting with our explorer boats. But that is where I am going to finish it off. Layla, it's all yours.
Thank you. We went way over time. There's been so much excitement over this, but just don't leave yet. I have another guest speaker, and she was going to briefly talk about now that we are going to Antarctica and we're going to this driest, coldest, although not in the summer Antarctic time, to that region. How are you going to take care of your skincare, or what are the sort of beauty routines that you need to take with you there? So I am going to, Jocelyn, are you still there? So I wanted to introduce you to Jocelyn. Kristen, I think you have to stop sharing and then Jocelyn will. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, hi everybody. Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute myself. I'm so happy to be here, and I know that it's, I mean, first of all, that was incredible. I learned so much, so thank you both so much. I wanted to share, my presentation might be just about 5 minutes, and I'm sitting here on the floor, and my husband plays with the Toronto Symphony, so you see the instruments in the background, the xylophone, we got a Peloton bike. So anyway, kids are in the other room, almost ready for bed. So I'll go briefly here, but I'm so just honored to be sharing as well. I'm gonna do a share screen in just a moment. but I wanted to just give just a basic intro is that my background is actually in yoga, massage therapy, and opera. However, I've been with a company called Beauty Counter for about 3.5 years now, and the company itself aligns with so much of what Kristen was just sharing about her ships and Hurtigruten. I hope I said that correctly. But education and sustainability are two of our key components with this company called Beauty Counter. Really, the word counter is the main part of our company, and we're countering the unregulated skincare and cosmetics industry, both in the US and Canada. So for those of you elsewhere, I'm happy to still share, but this is specific stuff about the US and Canada. And again, it's about countering this unregulated industry and using products that are safer and high performing and sustainable and eco-conscious. So I'm going to do a quick share screen and just show you some post-disabled attendee screen sharing. Sorry, can one of you guys allow me to screen share? And if not, I don't have to, but if you can, that's great. And I will just tell you while we hopefully get that fixed, that I want to tell you just like in about 1 minute, why we are even trying to counter an industry like this. Okay, here we go. One moment here. Share screen. Okay, so there's my daughter and I, Clean Beauty Advocate. The reason why we are working to counter this unregulated industry is because there's really been no major federal law in the US, actually since 1938, that protects us from toxic ingredients. In Canada, there's a list of about 600 ingredients that are partially banned or restricted. However, it's not codified into law. So there's thousands of toxic chemicals that we are exposed to in our skincare, in our makeup, in our baby wash, in our sunblock, in countless things. And so our company is working with advocacy. We go to Washington, D.C., we go to Parliament, we go to our local MPs and governmental officials to change the laws so that we can have health protective laws for all of us, whether you're shopping with a company like Beauty Counter or you're going into a CVS or a Shoppers or a Sephora. We want the labels to be more transparent and some more health protective laws for all of us. We're also educating, and that's what I find so similar to the cruise line, and working to make this world a safer place in different ways. Another thing that is similar to the cruise line and that I think would be really goes hand in hand is that we're a certified B Corporation, which as an example, Patagonia is a B Corporation, Ben & Jerry's is a B Corporation. So it's companies that are for-profit companies really using commerce as an engine for change. So Beauty Counter has been a certified B Corporation since we began about 7 years ago, and these tenets, safer products, sustainability, charitable giving, advocacy, and transparency are probably our main tenets, as well as beautiful high-performing products. Let me go to the next slide. So I'm just gonna show you a few things that I think would be incredible to have on this expedition, or really, I know Layla does so many other wonderful journeys and tours of virtually right now. These might be things you would want somewhere else as well. I'm not sure if you can see, I'm gonna get the pointer. Can you see this red? Yeah, okay, so this one in particular, this one is called Counter Sun Face Stick, and these are all non-nano zinc oxide sunscreens. This one is so great because I don't really assume in Antarctica you're gonna be in a bathing suit very much, but your face is gonna be exposed to the sun. And so this is so easy to pack, and it's safe, and just, it's gonna give you the sun protection that you need. Of course, we have a lotion and air-powered aerosol as well, so it's not gonna be toxic for the environment either. The other one that I think is amazing is a product called Body Butter, which is really actually one of my COVID-19 essentials right now because it is so hydrating for your hands. I really don't know what I would do for my family and myself if I didn't have this product right now. So this is a body butter, but it's also a hand lotion that's, I would assume, might be the #1 thing to have with you if you were to go on this cruise or any traveling in the cold like that. This is another one called Cleansing Balm that's a great kind of protective barrier for your face, whether you're skiing or you're out in the winter here. I'm in Toronto, like I said. I put this on my daughter's skin in the morning before she goes to school. You can sleep with it on your face. It's just like super, super nourishing and a protector. And the last but not least, we have a lip conditioner that's really wonderful for chapped, dry lips as well. This comes in calendula and peppermint. So those are, oh, one more. Dew Skin, this is a SPF as well, SPF kind of tinted moisturizer. So if anybody's interested, this is more about education, and my presentation was pretty brief, but I'm always happy to share about, well, you know, if you have a question, well, what do you mean it's not regulated? Or how do I find safer? Or what are you even talking about? I am so happy to share more. If any of you are curious, you could reach out to Layla, or you could find me. Let's see, here we go. So my email is down here for you to see, and feel free to message me. I'm happy to just share more on why this is also important. Whether you shop Beauty Counter or not, it's definitely a passion of mine to help educate. So thank you so much, Layla. I'm gonna try now to exit and stop the share. Okay. Layla, are you there? You're not? I think I'm all set unless anybody has questions. I have to make you the host again. How do I do that, Layla? How do I do that? Sorry, hold on. Can you tell me what you can't tell me what you did, shoot. Okay. Oh, couldn't see my email. My email, I'm sorry about that. It's Jocelyn Rose Yoga. So it's JOCELYN Rose, ROSE, and then yoga at yahoo.com. And Layla and I are friends, so I know she could help you find that too. Layla, I'm so sorry. Can you, I see you here.
Okay, I think I'm back on.
Okay.
All right, cool. All right, I know that we are out of time, but just to wrap up this evening about Antarctica, and by the way, I'll be sharing Jocelyn's offer to everyone who registered for this evening. So take advantage of that for sure. I know that even you may not even travel to Antarctica in the near future. It will come handy for those of us living in Toronto. But if you have any sort of questions from Kristen and I, let me know. Either put it in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask us any sort of question that you have pertains to Antarctica. So some of the questions that I have, and I'm just scrolling over in the chat box, are the ships wheelchair accessible?
Yes. Yep, our ships are fully accessible. We do have accessible cabins. Just keeping in mind, not all of the destinations are accessible.
Yeah, because this is, as we mentioned, this is quite a unique destination. There were some questions about the best time to travel, which we already covered. Okay, so the other question is Antarctica too rough for someone who gets motion sickness easy?
I always say Antarctica itself is the low-hanging fruit after going through the Drake Passage, because once you are in Antarctica, we spend a lot of time hugging, you know, different islands and different inlets of the coast quite closely, so you don't worry so much there. It's more so just that sort of day and a half crossing the Drake Passage, and that really just depends on the conditions. Unfortunately, it's hard to say whether or not you would go through it on your particular voyage. But there's definitely, you know, a lot of people wear the patches just behind your ear, or the wristbands, or ginger tablets, that type of thing, is a lot of what people will try, to help calm with seasickness. And I promise you, whether it be Drake Lake or Drake Shake, once you see your first snow-capped mountain of the Antarctic Peninsula, you completely forget anything you went through of the Drake Passage.
The other one of my insider tips that I share with my clients going to Antarctica is a lot of times people prepare and they bring all the layers that they can possibly bring, forgetting that they're going to Argentina or Chile first, and it's actually summertime there. So they get there, if they haven't got this tip, they get there with all these different layers that they brought for the Antarctica trip, and then they get the big surprise. So make sure that you're prepared for those two destinations before your trip. The other question, which I'm not 100% sure I understand it, is like, what happens if you can fly to Buenos Aires or Ushuaia?
I'm not sure I understand that either. I'll maybe just go over what so the way our package is structured is that you would fly into the major city of Buenos Aires. We include a pre-night stay there, and then we fly everybody on our Hurtigruten charter flight to get you down to Ushuaia to meet the ship, if that's where that question was going.
All right, so if we don't have any other questions, I wanted to thank you again for joining us. I hope that it was helpful, informative, and you took something away from our travel to Antarctica. Next week, we'll be traveling to Spain and doing something very, very different. We're going on a wine tasting trip to south of Spain. So make sure that you're following along, and then we have East Africa on the horizon and Sicily and Italy. So they are all very, very different regions, and you'll be getting our newsletters, and then we also share a lot of recipes for those of you who are coming to our virtual travel series, although there isn't much about Antarctica recipes, unfortunately, but for the rest of the regions, we've covered fairly good recipes. But stay tuned. Next week is going to be all about wine and no ice, I promise. And I had so much fun. If you have feedback, please send it to me. I'd love to read those. And if you have any other questions, again, reach out. Thanks again for those of you joining. Have an amazing evening. See you next week, Thursday, 6 p.m. for South of Spain and wine tasting. Take care. Bye.